I want to talk a little bit about the Mars Cazimi that everyone's been talking about on astrology, TikTok, and elsewhere. When we have a planet that's Cazimi, it means that it's forming a conjunction to the sun. And so we say that it's like in the heart of the sun. And today's Cazimi on November 18th is Mars and the sun at the same degree in Scorpio. And when this happens, we're seeing the beginning and the ending of a cycle. And in this case, it's a cycle that we've undergone with Martian energy. Mars can represent our ego, it can represent our desires, our lust, what we kind of chase after, the way that we motivate, and what we're motivated to fight for or advocate for. And that all depends a lot on the way that Mars shows up in our natal chart and the environment that we're surrounded by and how we're raised and conditioned and all of this stuff. Two people with the exact same Mars placement, like same degree, same house, same sign, will still express that energy in very, very different ways because of the environments that they've been placed in, because of their culture, because of the privilege that they have or don't have. And when we think about the ego and how the ego is something that is intended ultimately to keep us safe, I think it makes sense when we see like very different types of egoic responses from people based on what they've lived through and based on the circumstances that they're facing. Different people who've had to tap into their Martian energy to fight or advocate for themselves or others for most of their lives versus people who've experienced relative degrees of safety and maybe comfort. And so knowing your Mars placement is kind of only one piece. You have to consider how that Mars has been allowed to express itself. And the other piece there is that our Mars placements can help us understand how we can tap into, access, and express anger and rage and do so in a cathartic way as opposed to a harmful way. And there are a lot of people in this world who are not allowed to express their anger. A lot of people who have been taught to suppress, to shove it down, to put it away. And when you have to do that over and over and over again, it does something to you. And often that rage turns inward and you begin fighting yourself and harming yourself in various ways. The other thing that can happen if we aren't allowed to tap into our Martian energy, or if we don't feel safe to, or if it's never been modeled for us, like what a healthy expression of anger looks like, it can lead to stress. It can look like stress. It can look like anxiety. It can look like perfectionism. It can look like all of these different forms of tension that live within our bodies and that get expressed through our behavior. And so I want to share kind of what's come up for me personally today because I started this day and I was like, it's kind of a trip. I'm not really feeling this transit. I'm not noticing it a ton personally. And then I realized as I was sitting here at the end of the day, kind of just like getting lost in thought and recording this like way later than I usually record readings. But what came up for me is that I was thinking about how difficult it can be for me to express my natural self with people because there's this guarded part of me that sort of like, puts up walls or puts up some type of facade that is it's not inauthentic, but it's just like, it's exaggerated. I was watching this video earlier of someone who was talking about what emotional unavailability looks like. And one of the things that they said is that people often have this sort of like larger than life personality, like really animated, really big, but it's hard to kind of like ground and get through that veil of persona. And that's something that I relate to. And I realized that in kind of sitting with the vulnerability of feeling that and feeling kind of like some shame over that and some insecurity over that. I mean, I'm a Leo moon, South Node, I see. Like, I'm probably always going to have some degree of like performative flair to me. And I enjoy that. And I love that about myself. And I know that that's a part of me that can make it difficult for me to connect with other people because I sort of use that bigness and that sort of like gregarious energy to shield myself and to protect the parts of me that feel more vulnerable and more shy and more like soft. And growing up, I had to have some type of like harder exterior in order to get by. And I noticed that when I was just my like soft, calm, quieter self, that I didn't get any attention. And that it was when I sort of like made myself bigger or funnier or became like the clown or became the entertainer that I got attention and that I got my needs met. And so without realizing it, I developed this kind of habit of just like tapping into that energy, trying to make people laugh, trying to make people feel at ease by like making things silly or lighthearted or by kind of like overblowing this part of myself. Because I noticed it helped other people feel at ease, but ultimately I was trying to feel at ease. And so tonight, as I was thinking about it, this was kind of like an ouchy moment because I was thinking, like, oh, wow, like everyone can just see this about me. Like maybe everyone thinks that I'm fake or everyone thinks that blah, blah, blah. And I went down that path and then I noticed something different happen than usually happens. Usually, if I have thoughts like that, I'll kind of go into an anxious episode and then that part of me will actually come up to kind of shield me. But tonight, what happened instead is that I was able to instead just kind of be with that pain and to just let it exist. And it hurt and it didn't feel super easy. But once I was there with it for like a minute or two, it chilled out. And it wasn't super painful. It wasn't acute. It was still there, but I didn't go into my like Leo energy to the extreme. I didn't start performing happiness for myself. I didn't start trying to feel any way other than how I was feeling. And that helped me tune into my solar energy, my Taurus energy, which can be very grounded. And I think I'm not really sure why I'm sharing all this, but I think like hopefully it's a helpful example for some people who maybe didn't notice this Martian energy as acutely as some astrologers have kind of described it as being like ragey or bringing up all of this like visceral stuff. And that could be true for a lot of you. But I think for many of us, what's actually happening is that there's kind of a peeling back and more of a window of understanding into the way that our ego operates, the way that it acts on our behalf in order to keep us safe. And simultaneously, because we're talking Sun and Mars here, this return to the Sun, where we have this vantage point where we're able to kind of feel what our true energy feels like and to see the ego with compassion and even appreciation for the way that it has shown up for us throughout our lives to try to shield us, to try to kind of help us get through those moments where we didn't feel safe, where we felt incredibly vulnerable, and where it had to puff up in order to protect us. So, something to sit with. I hope that's helpful. And I'm going to try to share my Taurus energy a little bit more often on here. It's a good place for Leo stuff, but we deserve to be seen.